So today is a very, very special day for us because it actually marks our 10th episode. And we've been preserving Anna for our 10th so that we could celebrate with her and with all of you. So thank you all for joining in. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. We will be taking questions and comments. So please feel free to add your comments and questions at the bottom of the screen. There's a little chat box there. If you're watching us live on Facebook or Instagram, feel free to send in your questions there as well. We'll try to pick up as many as we can. I do apologize in advance for those that we miss out because we do have limited time, but we will try to get to as much as we can and get through as much as we can. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce for our 10th episode, Anna Heringer, who a lot of you will already know. Anna is an architect, of course, and an honorary professor of the Unesco Chair of Earthen Architecture, Building Cultures, and Sustainable Development, wherein her focus lies in the use of natural building materials. She has been actively involved in the development cooperation in Bangladesh since 1997. Her diploma work, the Métis School in Rudrapur, was realized in 2005, which also won the Aga Khan Award for Architecture in 2007. Over the years, her eponymous studio has worked on various projects across Asia, Africa, and Europe. She has lectured at numerous international conferences, including the TED, and has also been a visiting professor at various universities such as Harvard, 𝐄𝐩𝐢𝐬𝐿𝐴, and TU Munich. Anna is a recipient of many global honors, including the Global Award for Sustainable Architecture, the AR Emerging Architecture Award, the Loeb Fellowship at Harvard's GSD, and a RIBA International Fellowship. Her work has been widely published and exhibited at the MoMA in New York, at the V&A Museum in London, as well as the Venice Biennale, among others. And while very few people can boast of such achievements and accolades at this point of their career, what is most fascinating is the journey that she has been on thus far. And we could not be more excited to have this opportunity to talk to Anna today and to explore and find out more about what she's been through and what she is doing currently. So Anna, a very, very warm welcome this evening to the Unplugged Talks.
Thank you. I'm super excited and curious because I have no idea what kind of slides you put together. So it's going to be exciting for me too. Absolutely.
Well, the first surprise, Anna, is that there are no slides. So
there are no slides. Okay, that's even better.
So what it is basically it's a chat between us, and we do have some photographs of your work and your sort of interactions with the community, which we'll pull up as and when we kind of talk about it. But as I mentioned, it's very informal, it's very casual. We just want to get to know who Anna is and what she's been up to. So I'm going to start with, what I want to start with is this adage that you go by, right? There's a saying that you have repeatedly mentioned in your lectures, in your talks, you sign off your emails with this, which says architecture is a tool to improve lives. So tell us about that.
Yes, that's really my firm belief that we have a fantastic tool to really can have a real impact in life, in society, on the planet. And unfortunately, the other part is also true that architecture is a tool to destroy lives. That's unfortunately also true. But I'm an idealist because, the reality isn't just good enough. And I think we all need ideals to work towards. And for me, what I'm really trying to have an impact is, of course, in social justice. And I think architecture really can have a great impact on that, because we are dealing with lots of budgets. We are dealing with many people. So we definitely have power in our hands for that. And we, of course, because we are dealing with a lot of resources, we have also special responsibility towards the environment. And on top of it, I think the cultural diversity is also something that we need to celebrate through architecture as well. And I think through these things, we can really improve lives.
So it's really interesting that you kind of talk about this. Over the past few months, especially during this lockdown and COVID and this pandemic times, there's this one question that has come up multiple times in multiple conversations. And we say that, everyone's talking about the things that they're doing. Are they really meaningful? Do people are starting to question what they're doing, the choices that they've made, the paths that they've chosen. So I wanted to ask you, do you feel that what you do and the decisions that you have taken to reach where you are and the work that you're doing, do you feel that that is meaningful for you?
Yes, absolutely. With 100 exclamation marks. Yes, I am very grateful that I found that meaning in life and in my profession. I know that this is a fortunate thing because I know that many people are suffering not knowing what's the calling is. But I think, yeah, it wasn't that easy to come to the point also. I was like, when I was 19 years old, I lived for about a year in Bangladesh, just as a development learner. I wanted to learn about life from a different perspective. I wanted to learn from a Bangladeshi NGO, you know, how they are tackling issues like not just poverty, but also happiness, you know, just, you know, because this is all our goal. And then I had really a passion for development work. Absolutely. That was really something very close to my heart. At the same time, I felt this creative itching, you know, I wanted to do something creative and wanted to create some beauty. And whenever you heard about architecture or when you heard about building, construction in developing countries, you only heard about engineering, which was very painful because whenever I looked up in the internet, you know, there was the only architecture I found that time was engineering, proper engineering. And the beauty thing was never really discussed. But when I was in Bangladesh, it was very clear that beauty and is so strongly linked to dignity, and that is absolutely an essential need for people. And I remember one story, you know, I was leaving all good clothes back home, no ornaments, nothing, because I thought, you know, I'm coming to a poor, I mean, how stupid, but I was thinking I'm coming to one of the poorest countries, so it must be ugly. That's the mindset, you know, that I had that time. And then I was so surprised that I was the one who was the ugliest dressed person, definitely, you know, and people were complaining, you know, that you always, you know, so with your most ragged clothes and no ornaments or whatever. And then I was yawning one day and I have a gold filling, you know, in my teeth. And then the people were just saying, Anna, how come you wear no gold, but you wear your gold in your teeth when no one's seeing it? You know, what sense does that make? But I understood that, you know, that beauty is not something that is a luxury thing, but it's a necessity. And it's so much linked with dignity. And it's the same thing, like if you do something just on a functional level, solve a solution, you know, it's not, doesn't mean it's done well, you know, you have to do it with love. And for me, love is a form, or beauty is a formal expression of love. So I think, you know, it's not enough just to do some engineering structures or to do some functional structures. I really think we have to care also for this beauty part. So these two passions were always on my mind, kind of development work, but also the design. And then I went back from Bangladesh. I missed my admission test. I didn't miss it. I was not chosen. I was too not good enough for the admission test at my university. So I was really frustrated because I actually didn't want to come home. I wanted to stay in Bangladesh because I really loved it there. And then it was, sorry. And then it was really difficult for me to, come back, then having nothing to do. I just had to digest the time that I had in Bangladesh, and then I started architecture. Luckily, the second time they were able to, you know, I was good enough that I was taken. But then I started architecture, and then just before my diploma work, I had the typical pre-diploma crisis, you know, where I was thinking, okay, you know, all the things that I'm learning here is definitely nothing that relates to my other passion of development work, for really making an impact. It was completely detached, you know, we were solving problems often on a formal level, and I thought, you know, what does that have to do with real life questions? And then I was lucky because then there was this poster on the wall in the university workshop for modern earthen structures with Martin Rauch. and then I thought, oh, that's the thing I want to do. You know, I was always interested in earthen architecture, but during my studies, it was just not a topic. You know, it was not part of the curriculum at all. So, and you don't see it in the magazines, in the architectural magazine books. There was just not talking about it. So I thought it was just a hippie dream of mine. You know, that was not realistic. And when I saw this announcement of the workshop, I was really excited. So I went to the place, and the moment I had my hands in the mud, I just knew, okay, this is the missing link. You know, this is my material. This is the material that can really have an impact on social justice, because all you need, the material is for free. All you need is a lot of people. You know, that means you can hire a lot of people. You can create a lot of jobs. And the building budget, a lot of it remains with people. So for me, that was a really a very effective tool to deal with social justice on one side, and on the other side, the ecological part that was also extremely important to me. You know, it's the only material you can take from the ground, recycle it as often as you want without any loss of quality, and give it back to nature without leaving any scars, and you can plant a garden on top. So that was for me totally fascinating, and on top of it, it was beautiful. You know, it really, I didn't have to do any compromises when it comes to aesthetics and designing. So for me, that was really the missing link. And then I decided to make my diploma project in Bangladesh with that material, the Métis school, because I knew that the community and the NGO Dipshika, they needed they needed a school. So I just proposed them that I would design that, and then yeah, it got realized, and then I stayed on that track. But it was in the beginning, it was not laid out in a way that, you know, that's a typical way to do architecture. That was not in my mind. So it took some time to find that. But then, you know, once you're on that track, you just can't go back and do some ordinary architecture anymore afterwards.
But I think that that's what's encouraging, right? That it's been an unusual journey. It's not been a conventional path where you graduate and you do one thing that leads to another to another. You've experimented and you've allowed yourself to find your way. And I'm really glad you brought in the idea of beauty, because I'm going to quote something that you've said before. You said, joyful living is a creative and active process, and I am deeply interested in the sustainable development of our society and our built environment. For me, sustainability is a synonym for beauty. So I actually wanted you to talk a little bit about how you equate the two.
You know, for me, beauty is a real big harmony, you know, where it just is harmonious on all levels, and, you know, on not just on the formal one, but obviously also on the formal one. It's harmonious in its use. It's harmonious with the socio-cultural context. The process is harmonious. You know, all these things. And then it's not, you know, a counterpart to nature. It's harmonious with nature. You know, the whole building life cycle is harmonious. And I think if you have this on all levels, reach that thing, it's both. You can really not just see the beauty, but also feel the beauty from in it. It's like a person that is not just from outside beautiful, but also from the character from within. And I think, you know, this is the same truth for buildings. If the process is also beautifully designed, not just the building, and if it's in this bigger harmony, then I think you feel it as beauty, and you also, it's totally sustainable in a way that is also in harmony with nature and people.
And you found that harmony, and you found that your sort of material, your media or your medium to do that, to achieve that, was mud.
Yes, it's of course always with every project, again, a fight. I mean, especially if you work in a European context, it's very difficult to do that.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's not a path that is an easy one, because, you know, every you know, that material is linked with a lot of strange imaging that, you know, it's super vulnerable, it's poor, it's, you know, weak, everything. So a lot of fear is attached with mud. And with every project you have to deal with this fear of clients, of, you know, it's always the predominant feeling, and it's very difficult to, you know, to go over this fear. And that's with every project a real big discussion and the biggest fight. It's quite easy to design a building, but to get over this point of the fear, that is really the most difficult part.
So I also want to draw attention to the fact that we've titled today's talk "The Ground Beneath Her Feet," and this is
I love
because
the title.
this is an ode to you and your work, Anna. Because you have, I mean, and rightly so, you've mentioned multiple times, is that, you know, we're constantly, especially when we're talking about design and we're talking about sustainability and we're talking about resources, we very often forget what we are standing on. And we literally are standing on this massive resource, which is most often either free or very, very, you know, minimal in its cost and its expenses. And it is something that we can use and we can build with, but we very often ignore it. And you very interestingly mentioned that it's considered to be a poor or a weak material. And it's, I think, also because of its perception. For example, working, like you said, in Europe, it's difficult to do that, right? So, but you still chose to do it. You still chose to pick this as your material, as something that you wanted to experiment with. Tell us a little bit about that journey. Like, I'm sure you've had multiple challenges. It's not easy to swim against the current. Well, all your contemporaries are doing these fabulous shiny objects while, you know, you choose to do something different. What have your struggles been?
Yeah, it's the main thing is the fear, which I think is the core problem of sustainability, because out of this fear you're pouring in more cement than it actually needed, more steel that actually needed, more, you know, whatever vanish on the walls, you know, just to fight this notion of decay. But to truly build in harmony with nature, I think we have to accept death and decay. It's just a part of nature, you know. As much as you have the beginning, you have the end, and as much as you have the spring, you have the winter, and it needs both of it, you know, and the full cycle. And I think it's just something in our society, we don't want to think of the end. We don't want to think of the decay.
We want to hold on to things, right?
Yeah. And that's the biggest problem. And then we have this kind of perception that we built for eternity. I mean, which is absolutely not true. I mean, with so many buildings, you know, with all this concrete and steel in it, they're being teared down after 30, 40, 50, 60 years. So they're not standing for eternity. I mean, we are a waste society, so we should actually admit it and say, okay, we built decomposable buildings. Also, we cannot foresee what coming generations really need. So instead of leaving waste, we should rather leave know-how to build with the local materials available. And so the fear is the most difficult thing to face. And then, of course, also, especially when you build here in Europe, there's so many rules and regulations and standards that are created by the lobby, actually. I mean, very clear to say, because those industry who have the money, they can all do these tests. Also, they can also, you know, it's just incredible how the architecture is following the lobby laws in a way. You know, you say, you know, you need an insulation of X centimeter, and then you check that the centimeter size fits perfectly to, you know, certain products, and then, you know, and then, you know, 10 years later, you see that this XPS foam based on oil is probably not the most sustainable one, but then you have it already on the facade. So it's kind of a very lobby-based situation over here. And then just one example, if you want to work with materials, you have to prove that they're fireproof in a way. But then, you know, I mean, what happens if mud is getting fired? I mean, it turns, worst case, it turns into brick. You know, like, what's the big deal? But you don't have, you know, you don't have these elements to test and all these setups to test these things. They're costing a lot of money, so you just can't prove it. Just, I mean, if you use common sense, of course it's fireproof, but you just can't do that if you don't have the means to do it. And these kind of things are something where you think that's just not fair towards these materials. Or you have, you know, like the beautiful thing is Earth is not standardized, you know, it's everywhere different. So for me, it's a beautiful thing because you choose the technique according to the material characteristics you have. For example, in Austria, we have a lot of stones. In Bangladesh, there are no stones. So they have different techniques. Here we use rammed earth with formwork. You have more the rigid walls. And then in Bangladesh, you don't have formwork because you use 𝐶𝐫, for example. So you can go wild and crazy with any kind of shape. So, and then it has, you know, the surface of the walls is completely different. So for me, the material characteristics and also the local climate, if we take these two parameters and the vulnerability of these materials and accept it and not trying to, you know, eliminate it with stabilizations and so on, then we really are able to create an architecture that is absolutely unique and authentic. And that's really beautiful. And I think there's a lot of, you know, we always try to make something extraordinary and so on. But, you know, when it comes so randomly from the screen or whatever, it never is really something that has this authenticity. And I think that's something where the vulnerability is a super advantage. But it's very often seen as a disadvantage. That's the problem, to really to fight against these perceptions.
But wouldn't you think that given it's such a versatile material, there's so much that you can do with it, it would be considered something that's a highly rich resource? But today, on the other hand, it's known to be the poor man's material. Isn't that a little ironic?
Yeah, it's absolutely ironic. I mean, if you had to invent a new material that has all these high-tech qualities, like, you know, this balancing of humidity, which has a huge impact on the well-feeling, because you all know when it's hot and humid, you perceive it as even more hot. And if it's cold and humid, it's the same thing. You feel it's more cold. So that is the perfect material to balance this kind of this humidity. That's one thing. And then it can absorb smells. It can really, it stores energy, of course, with the masses. It's absolutely healthy for people to stay in. It comes in so many different shades and shapes, and it's fully recycled. It's easy to repair. You just need the broken part and fix it with water and time on your own hands, you know. So there are really lots of great qualities. If you had to invent that new, it would be really difficult to find this kind of material, you know, with knowing that there are no side effects for that. So for me, it's a low-tech material with a high-tech performance, but sometimes the figures are missing. You know, every farmer in Bangladesh tells you that thing, that it keeps you warm in winter, it keeps you cool in summer. But, you know, when you just look at certain facts, then it's very difficult to consider all these things. So these are the challenges with this material. But I think when we just follow more the common sense logic, I think it's becoming more and more important, especially also because we cannot afford in building with more concrete and those materials that are having all these gray emissions embodied. So we really need to look for other alternatives, and earth is certainly one alternative, because it's everywhere available, and you can do it in low-tech way, and you can do it proceeded in high-tech ways, and you can also mix these techniques, and that's a fascinating thing. So you can, it's really, you find the appropriate technology for every place and the appropriate technique.
And you've worked very closely in all your projects, in fact, but especially in Bangladesh, where you were working with the Métis school, and then you went on to doing other projects. You worked very closely with the community, where you had the people getting involved in the production and in the actual construction process. So it wasn't only about, okay, here's a set of drawings, and here you can go and fabricate your own building and, you know, build your own building. But you worked with them and you got them involved. There were people ranging from professionals and skilled labor to even the students who were eventually going to be studying in that school. And that's really heartening. And to kind of follow up on that, you did a couple of training centers, you did housing as well. Just a quick question. I mean, we're talking about a very, very densely populated part of the world. We're also talking about, and within Bangladesh, we're talking about an area where you were using very low budgets, and you were using methods that were very inexpensive. This was also because of just the lack of finances in that space, right? Now, tell me, since you've worked with these people and you've gotten to know them personally, do you feel that if they had the financial means and if they had the available resources, would they still prefer to build in mud, or do you think they would want to build in concrete and steel and glass and make these big shiny buildings for themselves?
I think there would be probably mixed answers, but the thing is, there has been so much advertisement into the other direction, all the movies that they see, and all these many years of times where all the people that had money were building in bricks, or those who had the know-how were building with bricks and with mud. It's very difficult to steer with, just with 3 or 5 buildings this stream. But they very much love the buildings. That's something that they are super proud of, definitely. It's really like they're radiating with pride about these buildings, and they also take full ownership of these buildings, and they see the beauty of the material, that's for sure.
And they're enjoying it.
They're enjoying it totally. But it always comes with the design. They always say, it needs both. It needs the design and it needs the material.
Of course, yeah. One can't be done without the other.
Yeah. So they would go for a very specially designed mud house. They would go for, yes.
And we've seen that in the Métis school, you've got this, of course, you've got these rectilinear spaces where the kids are sitting on the floor and studying, but you also have this very organic space at the back, which are these caved areas where they can go and they lounge around and they can use in their own ways. And there seems to be a very specific sort of experience between the two spaces, right? So why was it important to give them that cave carved out spaces? I'm going to try pulling up an image of it if I can find one. But if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so there were several things coming together. First was that the clients wanted to have a round classroom. And I was reluctant because I thought, a round classroom, it forces you to be part of the group. If you can't take the group, if you want to be alone, there's no corner you can just, hide, or just, it's a kind of forced circle. And I think it's important also to leave the momentum or the possibility to take a moment to retreat, to focus on yourself, and then go back to kind of the circle and the community thing. But I understood that they want to have something organic. And because they thought it's just more, in line with the philosophy of the school's philosophy. But I also asked a lot of teachers all around, and they were saying, we need a lot of corners, because whenever we do teamworks or we split the whole class in several groups, and give them different tasks, then you have to say, okay, this group is going in this corner, this group is this corner. So I didn't just give them 4 corners, but I also gave them the caves where they also, can have some small groups. And then there was also a structural reason. I needed kind of columns. I didn't want to make columns. So I thought, okay, I need some sort of wall here. So why don't they use the space for something special? And the nice thing was then, it was just the idea. I tried to remember the spaces that I loved when I was a kid. And I think it's just something very archaic, this feeling of protection, this warmth, this organic shapes, then also this momentum of being protected, being hidden. But what I think is very important, that you can have a full overview of things that are going on around, but you're hidden. I think these are the elements that the spaces that I do this exercise always with my students, to ask them about their favorite childhood place. And it's always something, either under a table with lots of tablecloths, so where you actually hear everything, but no one sees you, or you're hidden among in bushes somewhere where you are completely hidden, but you have your loophole where you can have a full overview of things that are going on, or on a tree and so on. So, or building tents where you have the same thing. So this kind of notion I tried to bring in, because I felt that this is a very archaic pattern, in the sense of pattern language. So it's a very archaic pattern that works no matter if it's in Germany or if it's in Bangladesh. So I thought, you know, that goes just for every human in a way.
So
and I
if I
wanted
can,
to bring this in.
so if I can take the liberty of also adding over here that
Sorry?
I was reading a couple of articles about
I can't
your
hear you
recent project,
anymore.
which
I
is the
hope I'm not.
Mrinalini, we have lost you. I think Mrinalini, you repeat the question.
Sorry,
In
can you
between, we
hear
lost
me?
you.
Yes.
Okay.
Now repeat the question. I
So
think you should do that.
in one of your recent projects, which was the birthing room, you were talking about that. I was reading a couple of articles about it. And you went on to saying that, you know, when you were trying to kind of create a space that would be comfortable, that would allow for the mother to be in a positive environment while she was giving birth. And you recalled your own experience while you were giving birth to your daughter. And during that time, you had actually taken a photograph of these caves from the Métis school and stuck it on your wall.
Yes.
And you wanted to kind of keep catching glimpses of that while you were giving birth.
Yes.
So it's really interesting to see what spaces can do and the kind of memories that they can bring about. And like you mentioned, can you share some more experiences like this from some of your other works, or your own, you know, like happy memories that you want to, or you feel that you have incorporated or have left a mark on you in your work?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, I'm always with every project, I'm trying to really respond to archaic needs. Like, and for example, like the Maslow hierarchy of needs is something that is always in my mind somehow. So it's the self-actualization, of course, that is important. You know, the thing is, we all, as children, we built some huts, you know, some play huts and some play spaces, you know, no matter what scale. But this notion of building is so much in our human DNA engraved somehow. I don't know anyone who didn't build any sort of, you know, nest, house, whatever, shelter. And yet, when we do architecture, we try to control every aspect of that place, and we think, you know, it has to be super perfect, and we just drop the key, and then at best we even plan the furniture, everything, and everything is correct, and you know, and then we are very keen on taking the pictures before the client moves in, you know, that it's still just perfect and the vase has to be exactly on that spot. And, you know, and what the client is doing, they're running to IKEA or, you know, to the whatever hardware and furniture shops and trying to please this need for, you know, creating their own nest and their own home. And I think, you know, I mean, every animal is building, you know, a nest or a home. So it's just somehow part of nature that we want to build this part. So this is something I'm taking serious, and unfortunately participation and you know, especially I think it's in the academic world, but also very much in industrialized countries, is always seen as decision making, or, you know, designing, and it's so ego driven in a way. And I think it comes from the hierarchy of the brain above the hand, saying that the deciding and designing work is so much superior to the actual crafting one and the doing one, the site work and construction site. But actually, in terms of this notion of self-actualization and so on, I think it's the manual part is extremely important. Also, you know, because you're not doing it alone, you're doing it as a group together, and that shapes, you're building not just a building, but also at the same time a community. So these kind of things are always on my mind, you know. That's why we had especially people also in the process involved that were just responsible for taking care of the children, being part of the process. So we had especially two Montessori teachers, Clemens and Christine from Austria, with us in a team that were just responsible for the children, because I knew it would create a lot of chaos on the site, of course, but I knew this is an aspect I want to address with it. So I'm trying to bring in these elements as much as possible. And of course, for example, in the Deschi building, saris that, you know, where the sun is shining through, and that is also, of course, a childhood memory, you know, when you have textiles, and then I built always a tent with lots of textile, and luckily I had really colorful ones. And then, you know, when the sun is coming in, then you see the whole hut is in a different light and everything. So these elements are certainly something from childhood, but also something that you just see when you walk through the villages, where you have the saris for drying, and then you have the sun against it, and it's just so beautiful. So these are the elements you just pick up and then try to incorporate.
Most definitely. In fact, I like how you talked about, you know, how architects, and this is something that most architects will not necessarily admit to, but architects want to make this very pristine building or a very pristine space and then photograph it and keep it for posterity, not necessarily curious about what happens to it after they hand it over to the client. And this is something that actually came up in conversation with Viren many, many years ago. And I said that for me, architects are like surrogates, right? We kind of talk to the clients, and we conceive of an idea, and we go through the entire gestation period. We give birth to the project. But then at the end of the day, we have to hand over the project to the client. And it really is in their hands how they nurture the project, whether it's a home or an institute, or it could be any sort of building. But what they do with it and how they keep it, how they nurture it, how they bring it up. So at some point, we have to kind of step back and say, okay, I've done my job, but now I'm handing it over, and it's for you to take care of now.
Absolutely. And I think it's also really important to, during the building process, already to design spaces of participation, you know, where you can come together and create something, be it a wall with earthen plaster where you put in lots of ornaments, or you do furniture or whatever. But these elements, I think, are important to include already in the design part. So I think it's equally important not just to design the building, but also to design the process, because there's so much power of change in the process.
Most definitely. So do you feel, Anna, I mean, you're sitting in Germany and that's where you're based, but you are working in different parts of the world, Bangladesh and Africa and parts of Asia. You've worked in China as well. Do you feel that it would have been different if you were living in these parts of the world as opposed to living in Europe? I mean, we've got, you know, there's a certain design culture that gets cultivated, whether you see Hassan Fathy doing it in Egypt, or Laurie Baker in India, or Jeffrey Bawa in Sri Lanka. All these people have worked locally, have worked with communities, and have worked with vernacular, you know, processes and material, and developed a somewhat of a, well, short of a revolution, I would say. And a lot of your work is kind of tends on those similar lines. Do you feel that there would have been a difference, or you would have been able to impact the way things are differently or more powerfully if you were living in those spaces?
It's a good question. I think one advantage is when you come from the outside, you see the beauty in the ordinary things, you know, because you're coming with just extremely curious eyes, and you find everything exciting, and you have this fresh look.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that is an advantage, certainly. And it also, I think, but still, I mean, in the beginning, I thought, you know, as a German, I have to bring the perfect technology, which is absolutely stupid. But I think, you know, it's much more important to raise the trust that the things that people have, the resources, the skills, the potentials are enough to create something beautiful without depending on external factors. And this raising of trust is something that I think for me is a key factor that I'm responsible for, because I'm coming from outside, I have a certain voice or people listening, because I'm different. So I'm getting a microphone in a way, or I'm getting a podium. And so I think that is also the responsibility that you know, erase the awareness of the beauty and the potentials that they have. And of course, if someone's saying that from outside, that sometimes might have a bigger gravity, because, you know, it's just, you take things granted, and then suddenly, you know, someone comes and says, oh, this is actually beautiful, then you look at it twice, maybe. So I think that's also an advantage. Yeah, but there are also parts, you know, where you think, I just would like to change my skin color because, you know, I want to be absolutely part of it. I don't want to be different. And there were many times when I thought, you know, it would be just, you know, I'm just the stupid whitey. I want to be part of it. You know, I want to be really part of it. But yeah, I mean, you can't change the color of your skin, and you just have to. Yeah, I mean, with every situation, there is coming a special focus, and I think, you know, there is some responsibility. And I found my focus in trying to, you know, to raise the trust in, and that's what I'm doing. And of course, when I'm, you know, for me, it's funny because I mean, a lot of the people that you mentioned before, they had, not everyone, but they had the training in Europe, and then they came back.
Right. Yeah.
With this European way of doing architecture. For me, I would say a lot of my formation as an architect was in Bangladesh. So it's for sure the more important part that I learned there than in my university. So I'm coming with this formation that I had in Bangladesh now back to the European context. And I'm really trying to apply Bangladesh to Germany now. So this is really exciting. I mean, this is super challenging, but this is, you know, I think that's probably for me now the more challenging part. Of course, could be like this, but and more difficult part, but I'm up to it. I think it's absolutely important and needed to show, you know, that these kind of values that are created by working with communities, by working with local materials, are things that we have that are absolutely vital and necessary in any part of the world, and also of course here in Europe. And I think that's the ultimate proof, you know, that it's not just, you know, we have a strategy for sustainability that maybe works in Bangladesh, but oh, when it comes to Europe, now of course we pour the cement because we can afford it, you know. That's just something, you know, no, I mean, we are one planet, we are one humankind, and we have resources that we have to share amongst each other in an equal and fair way. And it doesn't, you know, there's no approach and a strategy for this country, and then you have a different one for the other. There's just one ethics, you know, there's same values. And I think that's something we have to prove also from the European side, that we can, you know, we're not taking more resources than needed.
I'm actually glad that you bring this up, because there is this very distinct divide, right? Where we're talking about the global East and the global South, where these kind of practices work more often and are more popular or are more accepted. Whereas when you look at the West and you look at Europe and North America, like you rightly said, you have the means, so let's pour concrete. But we have to kind of break that barrier. What is unfortunate though, is that while we might intellectualize this whole idea, and while we might know that, okay, we should be looking at sustainable means and we should be looking at something that is, you know, alternative processes, this is not something that's really taught in educational institutes. So students do not graduate from architecture school thinking in this manner. And it's interesting that, you know, like you said, a lot of people get educated in the West and then they come back to their respective lands to start implementing what they've learned. But here you're kind of reversing the process. And I would imagine that your role at various institutions and where you're teaching, whether it's Harvard, whether it's TU Munich or ETH Zurich, I'm hoping that your role in these places is enabling that and is actually introducing these processes and these procedures into the educational realm as well.
Yes, that's what I'm totally focusing on in the teaching. And I'm also I mean, the crazy thing is that this way of building with local materials, lots of labor, which is absolutely common sense logic, is kind of in our economic system the most expensive one, which is crazy. You know, you take the wet soil from underneath your feet and you shape it with your own hands. It's almost unaffordable here to do it in the European context. And that's not the problem of the material, but it's a problem of our economic system. You know, if a building method is healthy for the planet, is healthy for the society, because it creates all this labor and work places, and is healthy for the people, for the bodies. So why would you punish that with all this, you know, with all the taxes? No, actually you should, you know, materials such as cement, steel, aluminium, and so on, they should be taxed with, you know, they should have a price that includes all the carbon emissions, all the effect that they have on the environment, you know, and then there would be a total, and then the taxes on human labor, you know, this load this is on the craftsmanship, that should decrease. So it's the human energy, you know, for me, it's not just a social issue. For me, human energy is a source of energy, just like solar, like wind. There's also the human energy. And I think, you know, there are lots of taxes here on this energy, while on the carbon emissions or on the energy based on fossil fuels, there's comparatively extremely little. So I think this is something, you know, we have to change. And luckily, I mean, the economics and the capitalism is no force of nature, it's man-made, so we can readjust it and we can change it, and that's what we have to do.
No, that's great to hear. In fact, you hold very significant roles in various organizations. Your teaching at Harvard has been quite a significant sort of step towards integrating this process into the educational system. And we've seen some workshops that you've done. We've seen installations which are literally sitting at the doorstep of Harvard, and how people are interacting with these mud walls, which might be very new to them. Whereas as per your statistics, 3 billion people live in mud houses today. But you're all
increasing, of course, but yes, I mean, there are more people living in mud houses than there are living in any other materials, that's for sure.
Precisely. You've been recognized widely for your work. You've been, you know, awarded extensively. We also know that you are the chair, the UNESCO chair for Earthen architecture, which puts a lot of responsibility on your shoulders, and it gives you a lot of power, and it gives you a position of power, but also gives you a lot of responsibility. So I'm curious to know, what are your aspirations given the position that you're in and the opportunities that you have to direct these efforts in a certain way?
Yeah, I mean, the titles they don't mean so much to me. I think it's just this feeling of responsibility that is something that I had from the very beginning. And I think what's important is that, you know, whenever I'm designing, or taking any decisions, I'm trying to multiply that by 7 billion times, you know, because I know the world is not changing by one big decision of one of the big guys and one big politicians. It's changing with the everyday small decisions that we are taking. And it's, you know, maybe it's just 1 liter of paint that I'm using, you know, and then you think, okay, this is just 1 liter. But if you multiply by 7 billion times and everyone is using a paint that's harmful for the water, you know, there will be no healthy groundwater. And, you know, if everyone is just using this excessive steel because, you know, you're doing a large overhang and you want to have the architecture just like coming out, you know, flying somehow, but you need all the steel inside, you know, if 7 billion people are doing this, this doesn't work, you know. So I think it gives you a good reference, you know, to say, okay, do I contribute to social justice with my decision? Or do I accumulate the money just at, you know, the people that are anyway already rich, or the industries? Or do I give it to, you know, to craftsmen? And do I harm the environment with this? And I mean, here, for example, we're just designing a project in Germany. The big question was, you know, the insulation material that you're taking. And it's a material you never see on the finished building because it's in the ground, because it's in the roof, you don't see it. But of course it makes a difference. And the difference in money is about 600,000 euro, you know, it's damn lots of money if you go for the ecological one or not. It's a huge amount of money. And then you're thinking, my God, and you could, you know, you could do so many beautiful details and whatever things, you know, but you know, you're putting a shitty material in this thing that no one sees, but you know it. So, and then this is exactly where you have to take these decisions. Okay, so if 7 billion people are doing this thing, how does the planet look like? So it's this kind of things that make the change, you know, the small things. Do I use now this glue that is harmful, or just do I find a different detail that I just can't copy paste, but that I have to develop? Do I have to go the extra mile to find this thing? And then yes, you go the extra mile.
But you're still talking about at an individual level, right? And I appreciate that, because you're doing that, and we've got a handful of people probably who are doing this. But when we need to start moving out of just creating, for the lack of a better word, prototypes or single buildings or examples of these means and ideologies, we need to start moving towards more of a cultural revolution or an architectural sort of change. We need to shift the paradigm. And I would imagine that being in position of power would enable you to direct it, or for you to be able to push it or influence it in some level. Do you feel that that allows you to do that? Or are we still kind of, do all of us have to still struggle as individuals to do our bit?
Yeah, I think it's an individual thing, you know, because if we just put the responsibility to people, you know, that are in power and so on, I think the world is not changing, because it's, you know, they're comfortable in their chairs. But I think it's really a revolution that has, you know, and a challenge that every single one of us has to face. And some people just do it in, you know, in their direct surrounding, and some people maybe have a stage where they can say something, you know, and yeah, I mean, I'm trying whenever I get the microphone and I'm getting someone's listening to me, I'm pushing the things that are important to me. Or, you know, like you see the signboard in the back, like less concrete, more earth. That's a sign I carried around everywhere. That was my Fridays for Future demonstration plate. And I also showed it at the 𝐿afarge-𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻 conference on sustainable materials that was happening in Cairo, with mixed reactions also. And of course, when you be in a context like this, it might bring a change, it might not, but I mean, every stage that is there, one has to speak out. And every position you are, if you're a mother and, you know, you educate your children to be sensitive towards certain things, that's also a stage. You know, it doesn't have to be always the big one with the big titles. I think it's just the one, wherever you're standing, you have to give your best.
I think that's very true, because what ends up happening is that we are always faced with this question of whether we should look at what we've got at hand and look at the project that we're doing, versus should we talk about the larger picture and talk about the ideology that we want to forward. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an either or, right? It could be a mix of both, and it ideally should be addressing both concerns. And that's important. And we've seen that with your work as well, that it's not only about, you know, doing individual projects that have been great or have been responsible, but you're also taking the opportunity to, whether it's address larger audiences at conferences or lectures or talks, and actually talk about bringing about that change. We do need to move away from these stylistic debates and talk about how we can actually implement these and create larger cultural differences, cultural changes in what we are doing.
Exactly.
So do you feel that you have some sort of significant platforms that you can use to address this? Or how do you feel that we can forward this and, you know, perhaps affect change at a larger scale?
Yeah, I'm taking every project that I'm working on as a statement. And of course, the teaching is something extremely important. Newspapers, media, anything, you know, anything. It's probably the biggest thing for me was really that that conference within, you know, that was hosted by the cement industry. That was for me probably the most challenging one, you know, to speak out, I would say. And there are, but I mean, I also go to schools here and talk with children, you know, and do projects with them. We just had a project together with 2 schools around here where the idea was, you know, first to ask the students of the Métis school to write SOS letters, you know, about climate change to our parts in the world, saying, you know, just we all know, you know, when the water level is rising, there will be a lot of climate refugees. But, you know, what does it mean from a perspective of a young person living in Bangladesh? You know, you don't want to leave your beautiful home. You know, it's not a country that is anywhere poor and you're happy to go to a richer country. No, absolutely not. I mean, everyone wants to stay in their home, and Bangladesh anyway is more beautiful than Germany. But it was really, then I thought, okay, it doesn't make sense to raise kind of panic amongst the students of Métis, you know, that their home might be flooded one day, you know. So I thought it's that the power for change is more, I mean, those who have to change are we, you know, are the teenagers here or the youngsters here. So I asked them to we talked about Bangladesh, shared many pictures, and then I asked them to empathically zoom in the minds of, you know, their Bangladeshi counterparts. You know, if they're 15 years old, they zoom in a 15-year-old girl in Bangladesh and write a letter from her perspective to us. And it was a beautiful exercise. And then the women in Bangladesh put an embroidery, these letters, you know, on the traditional clothes, and then sent it back, and we had it in an exhibition, and the students performed their letters, and it was very moving. And this was certainly a very powerful thing. Although it's just a few school kids doing this thing, but the whole audience was close to tears, and it was really moving. I mean, one of the sentences was, when the red sun rises for the last time, will they realize that we weren't the ones to decide? I love that one. It's very moving.
That is absolutely beautiful. It's very encouraging to see the kind of work that you're doing, and you're involving people in the process. It's not just about, you know, I think especially with educational institutes and with residences, it becomes a very personal journey when people are involved in that. And that becomes really fascinating, and it shows in your work. It shows in the work that you've been doing. I've kind of been exposed to some of your works, especially in Bangladesh and in China. And I wanted to kind of bring back to something that you said, and you mentioned that the concrete guys who sponsored this conference and you had to speak at, and that kind of, did that make you uncomfortable to be speaking at, or at a, sorry?
It was horrible. It was really, it was a really painful situation, because I mean, I'm raised to be polite, you know, especially as a girl, you're supposed to be polite, and then you're going to a conference that is hosted by exactly those people that you're addressing and kind of harming a bit, you know, or, you know, raising some painful points.
But why did you feel compelled to participate?
I just I was taking part before, and I thought, you know, is it good to you know, just to try to change things from outside, or are you trying to be inside and try to address it from inside? And I tried to address it from you know, they have these roundtables of sustainability. I spoke out also in the more smaller circle before, but this conference was a bigger one, and you know, it's just the elephant in the room that is not being addressed. And it was a time where, you know, the students were really on this, the kids in Europe were really on the streets with the Fridays for Future demonstration of Greta Thunberg, you know, and they were saying, you know, our house is on fire. Please, I mean, we children, we can't provide you with the solutions, what to change, but please listen to the experts, and please, people in power, listen to the experts and follow their advices in a way. And so the room was full of experts, like from all around the world, experts on sustainability. And at the same time, you had the people in power in the room, you know. And then I was just thinking of my daughter, and I thought, okay, now I suddenly have the stage, so I should actually say something. And what I said, it was not that cement is a bad material, which is not true, because it has a lot of qualities that are needed and special. So, but for me, it's a precious material that should be used in a homeopathic way, you know, so that the overuse is stopping, because the overuse is the problem, you know. And all I asked was to find measures to raise the price of cement, and to add all this, you know, price for carbon emissions and so on, so that it becomes really precious and the overuse is stopping. That's what I said. And it was painful for me. I wasn't, you know, but it's, you know, I mean, change isn't coming with the super feeling of harmony and everything is happy, you know, everyone's happy. I mean, change is also always a bit painful. Yeah, you have to go out of the comfort zone. It's just a matter of facts. If you just stay within your comfort zone, there is no change. And also, I mean, I think it would be a lie to say, you know, I think that's the dream in a way, that we find the bottom, we find the technology that we just can continue like this, and we just press the button, you know, and that solves the things for us that are uncomfortable. But that's not happening. I think that changes are causing friction or some pain even, and are definitely uncomfortable in the beginning. It will eventually change, but I think that's something, you know, that's matter of fact, and that has to be also, you know, because it's always the question, how do you include people, and how can, you know, I think there will be some friction. It's just the nature of change. And I think we have to be strong enough to say, okay, we are facing this friction, and, you know, okay, we disagree maybe here, but maybe we can join forces still together and create something, you know, because of course the concrete industry has a lot of ideas and technology that would be good for prefabrication of rammed earth elements, for example, because they have all these formwork things that come along with that. So, you know, and how to set up, you know, this kind of production industry and so on. So I think that's very important, that beyond, you know, this kind of friction, then you join forces again. We haven't come to that point yet, but I'm still hoping that we are getting to this point.
I think that always happens, right? When you've got strong views and you feel strongly about something, you are bound to be faced with opposition or contradictions or friction, like you said. I was curious to know, have you been in situations where you had to compromise on your own values or on your approach because of the contextual situation, whether it's a local authority or whether it's a governing body, or you know, whether it's a financier who's funding the project? Have you ever had to be or to negotiate that sort of a situation?
Yes, I mean, I do have to negotiate now a lot because of the financial restraints in Germany. Hold on a moment. Sorry. Yeah, so we constantly have to negotiate about these things, but, you know, I'm always trying to go not over a certain line where the whole concept is kind of not working anymore. For example, in the new building, I wanted desperately to do a wooden ceiling. It's not possible because of the money. And then I thought, okay, I have next to it, I have a full wooden structure, you know, that is purely wood. So I'm stating the thing here that it's possible, you know, and I'm pushing the limits and invest this money in really load-bearing earth walls that have not been built in that way in Germany before. And I'm pushing the limits here because I know this is the project to show this kind of, you know, to break the boundaries here and push the boundaries here in that thing. So I had to do some focus in this thing. And that's of course painful, but I know that, you know, if it's not gonna be built, still the project as a whole is pushing things in the right direction. That's it. If it's something where I feel, okay, this is completely out of balance now, then I'm not doing this structure. Then I'm deciding not to do it.
No, that's great. It's heartening to hear, because these are challenges that we face on a daily basis, being an architect or not, where we have to constantly juggle between our own values and principles and those that we're dealing with. And it's good to see, and good to kind of, for you to share some of your experiences as well, that it's not always a win-win situation. It's not always an ideal situation. And we have to make the most of what we've got and make the best of what we can. I know we're getting to the end of our conversation because you've got limited time. So I'm going to take the liberty of putting up some questions.
Add one thing, whenever there are compromises, I'm not just taking them, saying, okay, it's just like this. I'm really trying to change the situation that led to this compromise, that concrete is so much cheaper than the natural building materials, So I'm not just accepting, okay, it's the cheapest solution, so I'm taking it. So on the same time, I'm trying, to fight it from a different level. That's how I'm trying to do the compromises.
Yeah. We've got a lot of questions and comments that are coming in. I'm going to start with a question from Anne Feenstra. Would you like to actually unmute yourself and just ask?
Anne is on the way. He's driving again, so he will be not able to attend to this. But I think the idea is good, that we unmute and have also the video, whoever is asking, to make it look, to be more personal. Nice. So great.
Why don't we start with Ane's question? He asks whether, can UNESCO organize a global digital earthen architecture exhibition?
Oh, that would be wonderful. But I get no budgets from the UNESCO. So, but what's happening is that, there is this Terra Award that is a traveling exhibition that shows a lot of earthen architecture. So there are initiatives, but yes, it would be lovely. But unfortunately, it's more a title than any resources that I have at my hands.
Well, unfortunately, you don't have resources, but I'm sure that we can make use of the title and get resources with that.
I'm very happy to use the title then.
Okay, Gaurav Varshni, are you with us on Zoom? If you are, you can unmute yourself and address Anna.
Yeah. Hi, Anna. A very good evening. It's always a pleasure hearing you, Anna. So my question is that how do you envision the much sensible local building materials and knowledge systems being used in high density areas like in the cities where mid or high rise buildings becomes a need of the hour? So it's just a thought that came in my mind.
I think, the technology that is needed there is prefabrication, because you cannot turn with the water buffaloes and mix the mud and the straw. So you have to have some machinery involved, but it can be also prefabrication. It's a technology that my colleague Martin Rauch developed, and it can be done in a low-tech and a high-tech way. So you just ram or prefabricate the things, then cut it into pieces, and then, you staple it with big blocks on the site, which enhances a lot the process. And the density, of course, I think that's something we have to see also from a bigger perspective. Like the reason, I think there is a certain number, when cities are just too big also, like for example, in Bangladesh, I addressed this project with the textile project that I'm also doing Dipti Textiles, because I saw that all the women are, going from all around the countries to these few textile hubs where there are just too many people to really give good conditions, humane conditions for all these numbers of people. And how is it possible to bring the work where the people are living in the villages, where they can build their homes out of the materials that they find? So then we designed decentralized textiles that they can completely design in a decentralized way. So I think we have to look in all levels how to get the stress from the mega cities and create, sub-regional centers, where the land costs are not that crazy anymore. And because we have to work also on that level. And then I think, it's also an issue here. You have thick walls, but on the other hand, you get a really good living quality. It's like, it's walls that embrace you. It's walls that can have niches, where you can sit in, where you can have furniture in. So there is a lot of play with the walls, and then yes, maybe you lose some square meters. And but still, I think it helps you. You don't need the air conditioner and all these blah 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 things. So I think you have to see this kind of question has to be addressed on many levels, not just on the square meter size. And I think what would be good is to work on the ceilings. There are technologies, high-tech technologies, where you, with this Gustavino walls, or what Block Research Group is doing at ETH Zurich, where you have very less masses and height of the ceilings, because they're just so geniusly designed and structurally designed that you don't need this kind of super centimeters, of thickness of the ceilings, but can go with much thinner ceilings. And then you can, that what you lose on the walls, you just go one story higher, for example.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Gaurav. We have another question from Mehrav Mukhtarian. Would you like to unmute yourself?
Hey, so nice to meet you, Anna. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm from Iran, and I don't know if you're familiar with my country or not. The point is, our countries, and we don't have that kind of fierce regulation about not using mud and this kind of problems. But there is also this problem that in our country, the amount of human resources is not as cheap as some countries like Bangladesh or India. And there's this place in between that when we talk to people that, okay, let's use this kind of architecture, they just calculate it and say that it's going to cost a lot. And we are not that much rich people to choose that system. So there's this place in between that you cannot make anybody satisfied with this system. And also when I think about that in the near future, when the AI is coming to be the system which is going to be more cheap than the human resources, so it's going to be like a lot of conflict about using mud architecture with the AI. And what do you think about the future of this system?
Yeah, I mean, of course you can 3D plot earthen structures too. It's just, you lose something, of course, when you do it with high technologies, but it's in general, it's of course possible to reduce the amount of labor in a building. That's also the reason, why in Switzerland you also cannot do it with that high amount of labor involved. So you have to reduce it, and you have to use technology to decrease kind of the people involved. But still, it's the question always, how much do you decrease it so that it's still social in a way. So, but that's the nice thing with the earth, that you can mix systems, you can mix high tech and low tech, and you can go also only high tech. So it's well, only high tech means you still have quite some craftsmanship involved. But yes, it's a question of money, but on the other hand, it also gives you a lot of value, like for example, the energy things, that you put in then with air condition and so on. All these costs need to be calculated as well. And I think there will be, that's the system that I said before, we have to fight for real prices on building materials, that carbon emissions are taxed, and human labor, the costs of human labor and the human energy, especially the taxes on human energy, they have to decrease. I think that is something that we really have to fight for.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you.
We've got another question from Gayatri. Gayatri, would you like to ask a question? Okay. She's basically asking whether when you build with mud in Germany, what are the regulations using these kinds of material with respect to safety?
Yeah, so you have to do a lot of tests when you take earth, as if you invent a completely new material. So you have to constantly check this thing. It's a process that costs a lot of money. If you build the thing in Austria, you just need the mayor to agree with it. If you are building the same thing in Switzerland, you need the signature of the engineer. But in Germany, you have a lot of procedures and tests to make every now and then, quite a lot actually, to make sure that the quality is always the same. And it's quite a big effort, both on organizational level and testing and all these things. And it costs quite a lot of money, unfortunately.
So Anna, are you hopeful and are you optimistic about this process and about your means?
Yes, absolutely. Because I mean, the climate is on our side, the climate is a big factor. And also this kind of longing for meaning and doing something, meaningful and not just a random thing. And even, I mean, there's so much good looking architecture around, but it's not really satisfying us anymore. I mean, if there's so many buildings that make woo, and you have this, it's just, it's random. And we are longing for this authentic beauty again, and this really that where you have this inner harmony as well, and just the amount of media that are talking about earth now, and also there was never ever a critique on concrete in the papers. Now you have the BBC saying that if concrete was or cement was a country, it would be the third biggest polluter after China and the US. I mean, suddenly the numbers are coming out. So the awareness on one side is rising of how influential the building industry is on the climate change. This is raising. And then also this longing for meaning is rising. And I think, it was like in Germany, it's maybe comparable with organic food. That was something when I grew up, my parents always had organic food because we were having it in the garden. But, but now you can buy it in the supermarket, and it's not, it's quite common that you buy these things. And probably the next thing is clothes, and then hopefully the next will be architecture. But the more we are now also spending time indoor, we also know how much effect this indoor quality and air quality has on our bodies. And I think, the health is on our side, the climate is on our side, the longing is on our side. I'm sure we will win.
I think
this, I mean, every big movement has started with a handful of people. I mean, democracy started with a few freaks in Athens, in Greece. There were also not vast numbers of people. So that's possible.
Most definitely. I think your enthusiasm is highly, highly encouraging and motivating. And we're really hoping that a lot of the people who are here today can become a part of that movement in some way or the other.
Yes.
And, on their behalf, and I would like to understand that, would you be open to collaborations and working, and how does somebody get in touch with you to work with you?
I'm having a very small office, and also really by choice, because the bigger the office is, the more I need to say yes to any project that comes along. So I'm having really a small project office, and I'm pretty happy with the size. But I'm trying to disseminate the ideas and everything through teaching. That's what I'm trying. But of course, whenever there's a project, like for example in Bangladesh, we had students also from Prague University with us. So it's definitely possible when there's a building project that we include people.
No, great. I think what is important is also not to consolidate everything to one center, right? Is to have multiple sort of centers where little revolutions can begin and turn into a larger sort of movement. And I think that becomes important. So even if people might not be able to work with you directly, but they can always be inspired by you and can, formulate similar principles and start something on their own.
Yes,
and you've created that already.
Meaningful.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's much more meaningful, because I mean, every country, every context, every village, every town has some need, and to see that need and to address it with the creativity and to form a group of like-minded people, because it's always easier when you do it together. I think that's a great start.
Most definitely. Would you have any recommendations or suggestions for any reading material or any books that you would like to recommend to our audience today?
Yeah, if you want to know about earth architecture, is this one. It's a bit broken. Refined Earth from Martin Rau. Do you see that?
Okay.
Or where is this other one? Yeah, I also co-wrote one with Martin Rau and Lindsay Blair Howe. It's called Upscaling Earth. And from Didi Constructor, that one from India.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say these three, yes.
Perfect. And I'm going to take the liberty of offering your social media handles in case somebody wants to get in touch or ask any further questions. You are available on Instagram and on Facebook. So please get in touch with Anna. And Anna, one last question from me. I'm just curious to know that if you could ask one question to any architect, knowing that you would get an honest answer from them, what would that question be and who would you address it to?
From any architect, any question? No, from.
But you know that they don't have a choice but to answer you honestly.
Oh, for the architect, I don't know, but I would love to ask Gandhiji.
What would you like to ask him?
About, if he thinks, like the spinning wheel, the charka with thing, he was thinking, this could cause a revolution and not just a revolution, but the independence is so much, linked to producing your own clothes in a way, and, to get independent and self-sufficient. If he thinks that, building mud houses has the same dimension for him, like the clothes, the Khadi movement, that I would love to know. And if I think he was living in a mud house, so I'm pretty sure he quite understands. But I would love to hear, what he thinks about beauty in the role of beauty in retrospective, in his kind of approach towards freedom and also peace and stability and self-sufficiency and global happiness in a way.
Well, I'm sure I can't say what he would have to say, but I think we've got a little bit of an insight and a little peek into the same question where you're concerned. And I couldn't have been happier about having this opportunity. I know we're a little over time already, Anna, and I know you have a very busy schedule, but thank you so much for taking out the time and for being with us this evening and for having a very honest and candid conversation with us, which I feel has been highly, highly motivating and inspiring. And I do hope that our listeners today on, the various platforms that we are on, whether it is Zoom, Instagram, Facebook, I hope that they've been motivated to do their own bit and to start somewhere so that we can kind of weave our little movements together to form a larger cultural movement and to affect change globally. Not just locally, but actually across the world.
Wonderfully said. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we hope to see you in India next.
Yes, would love to be back.
Most definitely. You take care. And thank you all for being here. It's been an absolute honor to have Anna with us today and to especially celebrate our 10th episode for the Unplugged Talks. We will be back with a lot more. We've listed down the reading, the recommended readings that Anna suggested in the Zoom list. We'll try to put it up on Instagram and Facebook as well, in case you'd like to know more about it. And feel free to get in touch with Anna on social media, get in touch with us on Unplugged Talks, on Matra Architects handle, or personally with me, I'm on 𝐤𝐲𝐻𝐿 on Instagram. So find us, get in touch, and stay tuned. We will be back with a lot more, and we will be announcing shortly what is up next. Thank you so much, and have a great weekend ahead. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Good night. Bye.
Bye.